specialize in this whole area of the body, the head, the mouth, throat, and then upper chest area. So anything pertaining to memory, speech and language, swallowing issues, voice, that's all a speech pathologist does. So every speech pathologist is trained to deal with feeding issues, but on a very medical, therapeutic level. And so I started that journey. I got my graduate degree, my master's of science at Columbia University, and specialized in feeding, was trained by some of the greatest in the field, and just a great opportunity. And I found I really gravitated towards the feeding end of my profession because it impacts the quality of life so much. As a mom, what's the first thing you want to do when your child is sick? How do you love them? You feed them, right? You want to pamper them. You want to feed your loved one. And so, working in the hospitals, dealing with children and adults when they're sick and really going through some hard times, helping them to rehabilitate that. I love that. Then I got married and had 3 kids, and those 2 worlds collided as I started to really think about more what I was eating, what I was feeding my kids, what they were eating, what all those ingredients on the back of a package means, and really wanted to target this picky eating issue that seemed to be a common theme that a lot of moms and families were complaining about. Even if they were coming to me for completely opposite issues other than feeding, we still always ended up working on feeding. So that's kind of how that all snowballed and came together, became more self-educated on what's in our food these days, taking online classes and just the literature, and haven't looked back. So I wanted to write this book because I realized working on picky eating, it isn't as hard as you might think. And so I really wanted to give those tools over to empower moms.
So if you are just joining me, this is Ingrid Katz Lucas that I'm speaking to, who is a speech pathologist who specializes in picky eating and helping moms to take back control of the mealtime, because it can be a source of stress. Isn't it a daily source of stress for moms?
Oh, 100%. We're all busy working and living full lives. And mealtime is supposed to be that time where maybe it's 5, 10, 20 minutes if you're lucky to just kind of come together and regroup when we can. And that doesn't even happen a lot of times. And the last thing you want to do is have a fight with your kid at the end of the night about the broccoli or the peas or the chicken breasts, right? And you just kind of want to have that time to connect.
Yeah, I've seen it over and over. And like we were chatting about before, there's a lot that goes into creating this dynamic, of a picky eater. It can come from a lot of physical symptoms, physical problems to create picky eaters, but it can also have just a purely emotional component, right? Where the child is trying to take back a little bit of control because life is so chaotic, especially in the United States, and it's so stressful, and there's so much dysfunction, frankly, in families that the child wants to take back control, right? So tell us a little bit about that emotional component that you've seen yourself.
Right. Well, so there tends to be 3 main causes that start picky eating. It could be a medical cause, number 1. Maybe, your child has autism syndrome or Down syndrome or reflux, right? So something medical could start it. It could also be behavioral. And the third one would just be a sensory component. And a lot of times the medical and or sensory issues get solved, but feeding issues still remain. It's like, I treated my child for their reflux and that's been over for a year, but they're still not eating well, right? And the reason why it becomes so hard is because all 5 of our senses are involved with food, right? And so it becomes a very quickly learned behavior. Either you like it or you hate it, right? Because every sense is involved. And so the wall resistance goes up, and exactly that. It just is a stressful moment then. And the kid knows they can control that, right? Very few things they can control, and that's one of them. So yeah.
Yeah. And it sounds like usually it's not the first thing that they are addressing. You know, they've had other problems, and like you're saying, they're not getting solved. And maybe they're bringing their child to you, you know, when they've had this problem for a year or two, right? And the
Mhm.
poor mom is like fed up, probably exhausted,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And then they come to you and you calm them down, because I can tell you're very calm and you're very organized. So you calm them down, and then what happens?
Exactly. But you tell them they're not alone, because everyone, no matter what, with any child, every child goes through picky eating phase, because through development, they go through phases called pre-operational thinking, where 100% of all of a child's decision is made on how everything looks. It's not about the taste or the texture. It is 100% how the food looks. So it's natural for every kid to go through that. And knowing you're not alone is also, it is a calming thing. And knowing that they're in the right place to take the steps to move forward. Oftentimes moms, by the time they come to see me, their child has 10 or less foods in their diet. A lot of the foods are processed foods, and deep down in their heart, they know it's not a healthy option. There's a lot of kids I see that their primary, protein is a chicken nugget, right? And they know at the end of the day, it's not cutting it, right? And they don't want that to be the long-term fix. Really shocking statistic I talk about a lot, all these issues in my book, Feeding Your Picky Eater. The CDC 2 years ago released a statement and said that for the first time in human history, our children are not expected to outlive us parents in terms of age. And it has to do with what's on the end of their fork.
Oh, that's
And
shocking and upsetting, right?
I read that and that was my final moment, when I had picked up my pen and just started writing an outline. Because what I've learned over 17 plus years in dealing with so many different medical diagnoses and feeding issues and behaviors, I always ended up working on the same 3 steps. It's not as hard as you think it is. And, just up front too, to sort of like myth bust here, you don't have to chisel out a half hour or an hour every day and do some sort of therapy session. It's teachable moments. Maybe it's 5 moments at breakfast, 5 minutes at breakfast, excuse me. Or, 2 minutes in a car ride, or you get the 10 minutes at dinner time. You have these teachable moments that you chisel in. And I find that's what parents really love about how I work with them. I'm not asking them to make time for anything. We're just weaving it into bath time, dinner time, snack time, story time, right? And that's, a good 5 minutes, a good 10 minutes is much better than a terrible 30 minutes, right?
Well, you're making me think of something. We talk a lot about mindset in the group in Over 40 Fearless and Free. We talk about working on our mindset, but are you in a way talking about working on the mindset of the child about
Oh,
food with these
absolutely.
teachable moments? Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah. The biggest thing, you have to get a child open-minded to wanting to learn about food. If their first reaction is to put up a wall and to fight, that's where we're starting. And we have to crumble that wall down so that we could put the piece of broccoli out without them having a meltdown, right? Or without them throwing it on the floor, or without them putting it in their mouth and like gagging it out, right? So how do we break down that wall? And I talk a lot about different behaviors with the causes and sort of how to start tackling it. You know, one tip that can kind of go for a lot of people, including myself, and I will say I have 3 children, and my daughter, my youngest, she's a picky eater. She, depending on her day, gives me harder times than others. And if I didn't do what I did, I guarantee you she'd be living off of like mac and cheese and grilled cheese, I think. Like, I don't think she would eat much of a vegetable, because she'll fight me a lot on it. So how do we break down that wall? And I will say one thing I think a lot of us are guilty of at times is letting our child to distract them to be eating, is plugging them in, giving them the iPad, giving them the phone, putting a movie on. Some of my most behaviorally challenged children, the first tactic a mom always did was distract so that they're not focusing on the food and they're doing something completely different. And you can't, you know, that's the first thing I change, because if they can't connect, if the child can't look at the food and connect that, well, this is what it is, this is what it looks like, and I actually like it, then when they do see it and they don't have that connection, you get the meltdowns. So I think that's a really good tip for any parent, you know, when you start picky eating, try to have an attention span. Start with, even if it's 1 minute and you work your way up to 5 minutes. If you have a really young child, you're looking no more than 5 to 10 minutes for a mealtime, and to get their attention and you know, keep them unplugged. Think about it this way. If I was going to a math class, right, and I am texting on my phone the whole time, am I really going to learn how to solve this calculus problem? No, right? So it's really the same applies, yeah.
So what kind of things are you teaching them in the teachable moments?
Okay, so depending on what's going on with your child, and I talk about all sorts of different examples with different case studies in the book. So let's say you have a child that tantrums at the sight of food, right? You can't even like put a piece of broccoli on their plate without a meltdown. Step number 1 is letting them know before they even get to the table, they're not eating this food. They're not eating it. Just put that expectation out there. And I probably say that to my kids in therapy over 10 times in a half-hour session. I just keep reminding them every few minutes, we're not eating this, we're not eating this, we're not eating this, right? So that really, having them know they're not eating this yet, it really does take the fight away. And it might take some time to get to that point for them to really believe you and trust that. And that's okay, you know, but that's where you're starting. If you have a child, you can't put that piece of food on their plate with having a meltdown. Just use a separate plate. Just say, this is our learning plate. We're not eating this. You're just eating the food over here, right? You can even separate it out and weed it out. And I think that's huge. That goes a long way to taking the fight away and that resistance. Yeah.
I really love this idea of taking the stress away, taking the wall down a little bit and making it about learning about food.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were going to have, like, for some reason we found a teachable moment driving down the road, like you mentioned, what would we be teaching about then? What's that look like?
Yeah. So, you know, we'll look outside the car, you know, and I can only relate to this with my children. And we talk about what maybe we see growing. I happen to live around a lot of farms. So just being able to recognize and understand what's around us and what's growing. And then I talk about how long it takes for that food to grow, that apple to grow, that cucumber to grow. I just kind of talk about it. And case in point, so I do reference a fair amount of research in my book to sort of back up some of these points that I'm making. And when a child is more involved with just understanding where food comes from, they're much more likely to eat it, actually. And one of the research studies is if a child is involved with growing their own food, a fruit or a veggie, they're 5 times more likely to try it and eat it at times than not. And I actually tested this theory out, and I did it with my daughter because she refused to eat cucumbers. And I didn't have garden. I just put a pot inside and then on my front stoop. I grew cucumber. That was it that summer. I just grew a cucumber with her. And she was so invested and involved with just watering it and taking care of it and seeing it grow. She actually couldn't wait to try it. Is it her favorite food? Mm-mm. But she'll eat it for me sometimes. And that's the point, right?
That's fantastic.
It doesn't have to be your favorite food, right? And so, that's a teachable moment. If I am grabbing food on the go, okay, you do not have to know what all the ingredients mean on the back of a package. And I'll be the first to say, my kids eat a lot of stuff I don't want them to eat because you can't control every moment. I kind of have it balanced in my house where Monday through Thursday, I really can control well. But the weekends and parties, birthday parties, school, things like that, have at it. You know, what am I going to do? I can't stress over it. You eat well enough most of the time. The rest of the time, you know, you're going to have Cheetos. It's okay. But what I started talking with my kids is like, you see these long, long words on the back of this package. That's a chemical and that's not good for us. That's all you have to say. And I would say that to my kids over and over and over and over again, just to remind them like, okay, that's not a good choice. I'm letting you have that today, you know. You don't need to know nutrition to just make that a teachable moment. When I drive through, or not drive through, but like drive past fast food place, something I kind of talk about because it is a shocking fact. TBHQ is a chemical used in a number of foods, and especially with fast food. So it's in the oil at McDonald's. And TBHQ is actually a toxic chemical. And if we were to take a spoonful of it, which is 5 grams, is a little over a teaspoon. 4 grams is 1 teaspoon. So if I were to give you a teaspoon of that, 5 grams, it would actually kill you.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea.
Right.
I know a lot about nutrition, but I didn't know that.
our government, right, the FDA, has a whole list of these types of chemicals that they deem safe enough at a teeny tiny level. So our government on this list, it's called the GRAS list, GRAS list, which stands for Generally Recognized as Safe. So this whole GRAS list, and that's one of them. Food companies are allowed to put 0.02% in the food because it keeps the oil from oxidizing and spoiling. So that's why like McDonald's French fries can last forever, right? It doesn't spoil. I was just in the grocery store. It's in Reese's Pieces. It's in Rice Krispie treats, to name some other like popular treats that kids like. So yeah, they're allowed to eat a teeny tiny bit of it. You know, it's not enough to kill you. But it really got me thinking, like, gosh, I cannot believe we're allowed to eat a little bit of a lethal substance every day. You know, there is no cumulative effect. It doesn't build up in your body. It flushes out. So you'll never, ever eat enough where it's going to kill you. But it's something I tell my kids, like, guess what they're cooking with over there, right? My kids still want to eat McDonald's, but it's a lot less. I'm going to tell you that much. It's worked. Like, they understand, like, they really shouldn't. But we'll still, you know, if we're on a road trip, it's going to happen, you know?
Well, what if you ate McDonald's French fries every single day? Wouldn't it accumulate in your liver?
Not the TBHQ. The studies show that no, it doesn't accumulate. To put it into perspective, again, like you have to eat 11 pounds of chicken McNuggets to get 1 gram of TBHQ in the oil.
Okay.
Okay. So let that like sort of make you feel okay. Like, I'm not trying to freak out. But it's like, it blows my mind. I'm like, I can't believe this is a lethal substance and it's just all over the place. And it really, you know, got me on this journey, like understanding more and more what's in our food. So if we're eating a little bit of TBHQ, a little bit of food dye, a little bit of emulsifier in every packaged product all day long, every day, what's happening? What's the long-term health? And that's where the CDC statistic comes from, yeah. So, you know, you think about the cereals the kids eat, the little bites, the chicken nuggets, the hot dogs. I mean, all the different types of chips, right? It's endless. in my book, I take a lot of pictures in some of the schools I serviced, and I just took picture after picture of what kids are packed for lunch for a day. And it was just sad. And I'm not, I want to say this too. I'm not at all blaming a parent and pointing a finger. That's not what this is about. It's recognizing we need a little more balance. It's okay to put the bag of chips, but your kid should also be able to eat an apple, right? Like just a little more balance. And I think parents have it really hard. As we had discussed earlier, we have a big fight to fight as a parent, because these food companies spend billions and billions of dollars advertising to our children, and we have to fight that in addition to them just normally being picky and their medical issues going on and whatever else, right? So yeah, so all the hats we have to wear as moms. We now have to be a marketer, right? And a chef. So yeah.
Yeah, if you are just joining us, this is Ingrid Katz Lucas. She is a speech pathologist who specializes in picky eating and helping moms overcome picky eating. And she is the author of a new book called Feeding Your Picky Eater, the 3 most effective steps to target picky eating. And she is sharing some of her experience and tips with us tonight. Let's talk a little bit for a moment about some of the physical causes of picky eating. There are a number of them, including anxiety, Down syndrome, autism, failure to thrive. Pick any one of those or all of them. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. So for let's say a medical cause, if it's causing your child to have a lot of behavioral reactions, which we tend to see, right? Spitting the food out, throwing the food out, these really bad behaviors associated with mealtime, making a mess, and being a resistant eater. What do you do? Okay. So a case point, a child who was like that, he had Down syndrome. He was in a preschool I was servicing. He was about 3 years old at the time and had terrible behaviors around feeding, with preferred foods or foods that he liked, and with new foods that we're working on. So what you have to do with those is substitute the behavior. And what I mean by that is, so he would want to throw his food immediately the second he could grab it. So what we did was we gave him something that was appropriate to throw, a ball or a beanbag, into a little bucket on the side. So he got to throw something every time he took a bite. And then we slowly phased it out. Then he got to throw something for every 2 bites. He got to throw something for every 3 bites. You try to find a way, and you think outside the box to substituting a behavior like that. And it's not easy. And that's where, sometimes you do need a feeding therapist to help you get started, because it can feel overwhelming, like the whole new food and the behaviors and all of it together. So getting just a plan of care to get you going is a good thing. Kids who are resistant long-term, because reflux is a huge one too. Premature children tend to often have reflux short-term or long-term, and different syndromes cause that as well, and can lead to failure to thrive. Or you might have a medical diagnosis called EE, eosinophilic esophagitis, and it causes pain with swallowing. And you don't have negative behaviors with that. You just have constant food refusal and limited intake of food, where they're not even eating serving sizes of food. So how do we start working on that? Oftentimes we try to take a food, because these kids, you have to realize and keep the perspective, they associate eating with feeling bad. Like if you do something once that makes you feel sick, you're not doing it again, right? So that's a really hard thing to change that mindset with a child. So again, you start with, we're not eating this food. I try to pick a food that they used to have, but they no longer do. So I knew it was something they liked that's still healthy enough. Maybe it was banana, maybe it was yogurt, just a good food that they used to have it. they're no longer eating. And we work on the 3 steps with them. And again, you let them know they're not eating it, and you start breaking that wall down that this isn't going to make you feel bad anymore. And you allow that child to taste the food and even spit it out until they realize, like, this isn't bothering me. They don't have to eat it. I'll put a spit cup right there on the table for them, because we want zero anxiety or fear with the whole process, start to finish, from mouth to stomach, right? And you slowly desensitize that, working through all the sensory areas, right? Sight, smell, touch, taste, even sound. If it's a crunchy food, you can hear that when you crunch. So we often disregard sound at times, but that's how you kind of help a kid like that. And you try to also help bridge the gap too for a parent, especially when their diet is so limited and they could be failure to thrive. Like, maybe they really need calories. So what do we do to bridge the gap? So I'll jump ahead real fast and I'll give you one life hack, since it works so well with these clients of mine. You can't sneak in foods. You can't just hide an avocado in a meatball, right? Like, it doesn't work. Kids know, right? You can't just sneak any veggie in and puree it and voila. I wish it were that easy. But there is something you can give them, you can sneak in. It's called MCT oil, or the medium chain triglyceride oil. It is extremely, extremely healthy for brain support, brain health, and adding those extra calories. It's clear and it's odorless. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that at all, Jiva.
No, but I've heard of it, but I didn't know the value of it. So I'm happy to hear more.
I talk a lot about these types of products in my book as well. It's the only product that I've ever been able to sneak in with my most pickiest of eaters, and to help boost those calories, give that brain support.
How did you sneak it in? Did you put it in a smoothie? Did you?
You can literally, whatever your kid is eating, you can drizzle it on their mac and cheese, a teaspoon of it, and just mix it in, because there's no taste and it's clear. You could brush it right on top of a slice of pizza. You could mix it in yogurt. I used to do that. Not that my kids needed it, but I would just make a smoothie for them, and I would just throw a little in because I knew it was great for them, especially when they were younger. So that is like my big tip on that, to help a parent sort of feel more like at peace in that moment while they're working through this, to just give them something to bridge the gap.
That's fantastic. And again, the book that you're referencing is Feeding Your Picky Eater, the 3 most effective steps to target picky eating. Tell us about the course. Are you still working on the course? Is it done yet?
The course is done. And what's great, I'll have all the links for you in the Facebook post. I have a website that has my course and my book and other handouts, like a weekly food tracker and extra tips, health life hack sheet, sugar sheet. And I'll give you, sorry, it's just my daughter popping through. So all that's in the website link that I'll give you. And then I do have my book up on Amazon, and the print book is coming to be coming, but the ebook is up there right now. Yeah.
Well, that is great. We'll also put this information into the YouTube video. But what was I about to ask you?
That's all right.
Oh, about the course.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah.
What do they learn in the course? What is the goal? How do they feel after the course?
So the course really echoes what's in the book. My class is kind of like the movie. If you read a great novel, it's just the movie of it. So the book, you're going to get a lot more detail and specific examples. But I give the overall gist of what's in the book in the class. It's a 90-minute class. It's in 5 segments. And it's really, the nuts and bolts of what's in the book. And
is the course a video series, or is it? Yes. Yeah. So some people might prefer to watch the videos than read the book. right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
And you really should feel at the end of the class and the book like you have the best plan here. Like you are in control again. That's the goal. Mom, you are in control. You are in the driver's seat, not your kid at the dinner table. You don't have to be cooking 10 different meals, right? Because that's what a lot of moms start becoming, are these short order chefs, right? Oh, he doesn't eat that now, right? So I'm going to make this for him and this for her. And I've seen that more than I prefer to see. And it's insanity for moms. Even in my own family, having relatives show up with their kid at a holiday bringing McDonald's because that's what they eat. And we have this gorgeous holiday turkey at like the whole, fixins. It's like, so yeah. So you should, as a mom, feel like you can do this because it is doable and that you have control again and a plan of action that you can do. You do not have to be a trained feeding therapist to do this and help your kid out long term.
Great. I have a couple more questions for
Yeah,
you, but I'm curious. Do you work with moms remotely?
100%. Especially with COVID. I mean, that really pushed everything on. And there's a link on the website there to book me via Calendly. And there's a whole promo deal on it for being half off if you sign up for the book or class. For 5 sessions, you get half off. And I take different insurances and I work with families as well, as much as I can with getting insurance to cover and pay because it's so important, and so I really try to connect with them. And oddly enough, like a child doesn't always and often even need to be part of feeding therapy and physically there to have the half an hour conversation and work through a plan with a parent and really understand what's going on their end. And again, what's different about like my book and my classes, I make it a 3-step plan. Anybody can do 3 things. You can always remember 3 things, right? And so I take the most important 3 things and I put it out there for you and I make it part of your daily routines. And I think that's what's so different about all the other material out there. There's other books and products that echo some of what I say, but they don't really streamline it for you in those 2 facets. And I take it one step further and I figured out a bunch of like life hacks to really help parents make their children healthier through this journey. As we all know, it's a process and it takes time. Yeah.
Yeah. So, can you share with us a couple of success stories about clients that you've worked with? Just give us like the before and after
Okay.
shot of a couple of kids without mentioning any names because I
Yeah.
know that's not
Uh,
that's not professional, but we can talk in generalities.
yeah. Yeah. No, legally as a health professional, right? Due to HIPAA laws, there's full confidentiality. I did have some interesting cases. I've had more recently, one teenager and one adult with significant anxiety around feeding. One happened to be due to a choking incident that was just very random, but it caused her to just not stop at eating, but really have a hard time with eating. And so desensitizing her through that. And the other was the adult, again, significant anxiety to eating, but it all stemmed based from sensory issues that were just never addressed well as a child that snowballed very much so into adulthood and turned from sensory into a very like anxiety based issue for her. And what's interesting for any kid, especially these 2 individuals, once you go through the process with the first 2 foods, they're going to be the hardest. After that, it's like a piece of cake. Like the 3rd food, the 4th food can come so much easier. Okay. So yeah, they were not eating vegetables, especially. I mean, that's always like an underlying factor. And they're both back. The one girl's back to her regular diet, the one who had the choking incident. Then the other lady last I met her, she's discharged, she had moved away, but she started to be able to incorporate 2 different vegetables in her diet.
Yeah.
She wasn't thrilled, but she was okay with it. So both people were able to expand their diets and feel like they were healthier again, or living more normal and balanced. And for children, again, circling back to that child with Down syndrome that had all those behaviors, parents went from not being able to go anywhere in public because it was so embarrassing, the tantrum, the throwing, the spitting, to they could go out for dinner,
Oh, that's so nice.
That's huge, right?
Yeah.
Where they could go attend a birthday party and not have to cringe about how their son's going to behave, right? And I think that social aspect is always a big 180 for all my clients. As they're working on the eating, they feel more at ease being able to attend a party, go out to a different restaurant. Some families really get pigeonholed, like, oh, my kid doesn't eat anything off this menu, we can't ever go here. And so it does change a lot of family dynamics socially. And I love to see that when that happens, that they start attending events again.
Yeah,
So,
the pressure's down and the anxiety's down, and the kid is getting healthier and thriving, right? They're starting to just thrive and maybe even come up to the level that they're supposed to be at for their age thing, right? That's fantastic.
And what's great is, kids learn from kids. And so when a kid is just doing well enough and can sit there and see what other kids are doing with food, I can't tell how many times a parent will come back to me and say, wow, like we finally went to this birthday party and they tried an apple slice or whatever food might have been out that they would have never just, and it's not that they even ate it, it was just that they were open to it and touched it and like maybe took a taste or not. It's huge. I had another client, she had a very rare syndrome, extremely rare, called Apert syndrome. And due to all of her physical anomalies with her mouth, her arch, the palate, her teeth, and a ton of surgeries with her mouth, she was very orally defensive and had a very limited diet, but she actually could chew food. She just didn't realize she could. And so we started working on that with her in therapy. And that was one of my examples that she went to a birthday party and saw what the other kids were eating and touching, and she was doing the same thing that they were. She would have never have even attempted those things that year prior. So mom was just thrilled. She felt like she was a little more of a normal kid that could fit in.
Well, before we go into any other tips that you want to share, I just want to acknowledge you, Ingrid, for what you're doing for women, for moms, for women, and how it kind of fits into our mission and vision at Over 40 Fearless and Free, because we really want to create like a network of women who are fearless leaders around the world, and they're leaders in their own sphere of influence. So whatever that sphere is, it might be the family, it might be leadership in their community or their business or their government. And by helping these women and moms to lower the stress level and connect with their children and really like bring this happy, good vibe into the family, you're definitely being instrumental in helping us to achieve our vision at Over 40 Fearless and Free. So I want to acknowledge you for that, and for helping women to become fearless at mealtime, which is an important time of the day. So thank you for that. Are there any other tips you want to add?
Sure. So with that thought, I love your platform. And again, thank you for this opportunity for me to have to give this information to moms. I'm really good at a health professional being a feeding therapist, and I have a big learning curve with technology. So I'm really trying to get out there in this world and tackle that and learn new things. So to bridge the gap makes us all feel better, right? How do we bridge the gap? Well, we try to help our children eat healthier. And one thing you can do without changing their diet, and especially if you have a child that has a very limited diet, and again, usually I tend to see it's like maybe at most 10 foods and most of it's processed foods. Just give the child an Epsom salt bath. You put 1 or 2 cups in a bath and let them sit for 20 minutes. Epsom salt has magnesium. All of our cells in our body need magnesium. So I don't have to get anything in my child's mouth to get magnesium. I do that a lot in the wintertime with my own kids. And it's calming. It's a relaxing thing to do, but I know they're getting the magnesium. So that's one great little tip to sort of feeling like you're in the right direction health-wise. Another thing, I talk a lot about with the chemicals of food, and it can feel so overwhelming. How do you start reducing that? Everything seems to have all these big words, right, on the back of our packages. So just pick one thing you want to eliminate and raid your pantry. So maybe you want to eliminate dye, right? That is probably one of the biggest, most pervasive chemicals is food dye. And there's a lot of problems with that and another conversation, but maybe you just become a dye-free house, right? That's great, because when you choose one thing you want to try to eliminate, you end up eliminating other things anyway. I had a girlfriend actually utilize that tip. She became a dye-free house. So everything, her soap no longer had dye in it, right? Shampoo, anything food related. She just really became dye-free and felt like that was good enough for her. And it's still great, So you could do that as well. Another quick tip in terms of like one of my awesome therapy tips, we don't always have great days. Sometimes we're way too busy and we can't work on our goals. And your kid's not always going to have a great day. You're not always going to be able to get those 5 or 10 minutes in, right? Some days are just too busy, or some days your kid is just not feeling well or just not cooperating. On your good day, please, please, please take a video, record your child of them doing the thing it is you want them to do with the food. Because when you're having a bad day or a too busy day, if they see this 1-minute video of themselves touching the food and they're happy or smelling it or tasting it, it's telling them there's something in our heads called mirror neurons in our brain. And it tells us like, hey, I can do that. I do those things. I eat that, right? So on those days, give them your cell phone and let them watch that video a couple times. And that's fantastic. That's great. Good as gold. So you can do that too, to take some of the stress off you of not always having to work on it every day.
Well, that is fantastic. Thank you for all these amazing tips. So helpful. I want to reiterate some of the things that that Ingrid shared. So number 1, look for the teachable moments. There are teachable moments that happen. 2, substitute behavior. If you're finding a behavior that is unacceptable at dinner time, try to look for a way to substitute. Try to lower the stress level. Always try to have a lower stress level with all of these picky eating situations. Try not to let it escalate into a huge conflict. Use MCT oil as a great nutrition supplement. It's an oil that you can add to anything that helps brain function. It's clear, kids won't notice it. It's great. And lastly, one that I loved, make a video of a win. So when your child has done something right and it's kind of a big win day, make a video of that moment to show them on another day when they're perhaps not doing as well. So some really great tips, but this is really only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the amount of knowledge and wisdom that Ingrid shares in her book and her course. Again, the book is called Feeding Your Picky Eater, 3 of the most effective steps to target picky eating. You can find it on Amazon, and the information will be down below. If you'd like to work with Ingrid personally, reach out to her on Facebook. She'll also have some other ways to connect in the comment section here. She is a wonderful person to work with that will calm everyone down and make you feel like you can do it. You can overcome these feeding issues. So with that, anything else to share before we say goodnight?
No, Jiva, just a big thank you, and thank you to all the ladies listening, and especially in your group, since you have such a big group and a diverse group in age. You know, maybe you're not a mom anymore, maybe you're a grandma now or an aunt, and just sharing the information to someone you know who could use it is always fantastic too.
Yes, and that makes me remember that you can also reach out to Ingrid in the group if you're a member of Over 40 Fearless and Free. Friend request her, send her a private message, but just connect. We love connections. And thank you for watching tonight. Love having you with us. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.